It was too late, and Diana couldn't pinpoint the exact hour, but she was absolutely certain it was too late for anyone to ring. Even if it was Marty's phone, she wasn't in the mood. She simply buried her face in the pillow, muttering aloud, "Thank you." Just as she finally started to relax, the incessant ringing resumed. She cursed under her breath, reopening her eyes. "Martin, answer your darn phone!" she yelled, only to stop abruptly as she realized her husband wasn't beside her. Glancing at the clock, it read 3:37 a.m. Grabbing her phone from the nightstand, she puzzled over Marty's absence. He was there when they turned in for the night. "Hello?" she mumbled into the receiver, still groggy. "Is this Diana Miller?" came the voice on the other end. "Yes, that's me," she confirmed. "Who's calling?" "Mrs. Miller, this is Northtown Medical Center's emergency room. Your husband was brought in an hour ago, and we had your contact info from a previous incident," the caller explained. "Could you come over right away? There's been a car accident." "Oh God, is he all right?" Diana exclaimed, her worry evident. "I'm not authorized to discuss his condition over the phone, ma'am, but please come," the voice on the line urged. "Yes, of course, I'll be there ASAP," Diana promised before dashing upstairs to her daughter's room. Dallas, named after the city of her conception, attended a local university but opted to live at home to save money. While she enjoyed dorm life during her freshman year, she soon realized it wasn't conducive to her studies. "Dal, wake up!" Diana called, gently nudging her daughter's shoulder. Still groggy, Dallas struggled to focus her blurry eyes. "Your father's been in an accident. He's in the emergency room. Get dressed. We need to go," Diana urged, already pulling clothes for Dallas. Once dressed, they hurried to the hospital. Dallas bombarded her mother with questions along the way, but Diana had few answers. Arriving at the hospital felt like an eternity, though it was only about 10 minutes due to light traffic. In Martin's room, they were taken aback by his condition, covered in bandages and unconscious. As they filled out paperwork, a nurse dryly remarked, "Your grief doesn't exempt you from paperwork." Dallas scooted her chair closer to her father, and they sat together for about an hour, until a man and woman in police uniform walked in. "Good evening, ma'am. I'm Officer Gail Stanton, and this is my partner, Robert Hansen. We were the first responders at the scene," Officer Stanton introduced. "Any updates on his condition?" Diana inquired. "We haven't been briefed yet," Officer Hansen replied. "This is my daughter, Dallas. We have some questions for you. I know it's a difficult time, but it's best to address this as soon as possible," Diana explained. "Certainly. Can you confirm your husband's whereabouts prior to the incident?" Officer Stanton asked. "He was at home. We went to bed around 10 p.m. I wasn't aware he had left until the hospital called," Diana responded. "Dallas, can you corroborate this?" Officer Hansen queried. "Yes, we finished watching a movie with Keanu Reeves around 10, then we all went to bed. I saw Dad go to the bedroom with Mom," Dallas confirmed. "Did you encounter any significant problems like financial or marital issues?" Officer Stanton inquired. "Nothing out of the ordinary for married life, no particular problems," Diana replied. "I'm just puzzled as to why he left without telling me," she added. "Were there any injuries in the other vehicle?" Diana asked. "That's the thing, Mrs. Miller. It was a single-car crash. According to witnesses, your husband's car was driving normally, then suddenly accelerated into a tree. There were no skid marks and no one saw brake lights," Officer Hansen explained. As the implication dawned on Diana and Dallas, they exchanged a concerned glance. "Are you suggesting my husband did this intentionally? That he tried to take his own life?" Diana asked, her voice trembling with disbelief. "We'll need to examine the car for potential mechanical issues. And of course, we'll speak with your husband when he regains consciousness." "It's one of the possibilities we're considering," Officer Stanton explained. "Yes, are you certain there weren't any noteworthy problems?" Diana questioned. "Officers, my husband and I have a strong marriage. There are no issues I can think of. I believe it was just a loss of control or him nodding off. It was very late. It's plausible," she managed before breaking into tears. Officer Stanton left her card on the table, urging them to reach out if they recalled anything else, then departed the hospital. Dallas closed the door to Martin's room. "You didn't tell them?" she asked. "No, Dallas, I didn't," her mother replied, wiping her tears. "It's not their concern and doesn't relate to the accident. Your father wouldn't want that. Perhaps he'll mention something when they speak with him. We'll see then." The following days dragged on. Martin remained unconscious in the hospital, while Diana and Dallas stayed by his side as much as possible. They ensured he was never alone. Diana contacted Martin's employer to explain his absence without implying anything about self-destruction. The accident occurred on Saturday night, and signs of Martin awakening finally surfaced on Wednesday morning. By noon, his eyes had fluttered open, though he could only glance around. Diana, noticing his awakening, approached the bed to offer reassurance. Shortly after, a nurse rushed in upon seeing the alert on the monitors. Diana returned to her seat, allowing the nurse to attend to him. Soon, additional doctors arrived to assess Martin. Taking advantage of the moment, Diana stepped outside to call Dallas and inform her of her father's awakening. Receiving no answer, she left a voicemail. As most of the medical equipment was removed, it became evident that Martin's left arm was fractured, but being right-handed, this shouldn't pose a significant hindrance. His throat was irritated from the tube, so a whiteboard was provided for communication. After reading his message, the nurse sought confirmation, which Martin nodded to. The nurse promptly exited to confer with others while tests continued. "Mrs. Miller, I regret to inform you that your husband has requested that you and your daughter not be permitted in his room," the nurse relayed.
"What? He's my husband. I have every right to be by his side,"
Diana protested. "I understand, Mrs. Miller, but the patient's wishes take precedence. Let me speak with him. We'll sort this out," the nurse assured. Diana attempted to bypass the nurse, but was stopped. Frustrated, she resorted to shouting, "Martin, please talk to me. What's going on?" "Mrs. Miller, please refrain from shouting. You're disturbing our other patients. You may wait outside if you prefer. However, if you attempt to enter the room or cause disruption, we'll have to ask you to leave the premises." "Is that clear?" the nurse warned.
"Yes, of course,"
Diana reluctantly acquiesced, realizing she had no other option. Dallas finally arrived at the hospital, finding her mother seated outside the room.
"Mom, why are you here? Dad forbade us from entering the room." "Us? I get why he banned you, but why me? What's that about? And why did it take you so long to get here?" "I had just woken up when Bradley came by to check on me. We're kind of a thing. You chose to be with your boyfriend instead of being here for Dad."
"I'm sorry, Mom, but Dad was unconscious when I left," Dallas replied, her tone lacking remorse. "It was really stressful and I needed to unwind. It helped. For what it's worth, you should call too when you get the chance." "I won't do that. Let's not discuss it now. It's disrespectful," Diana retorted, the irony not lost on Dallas, who couldn't help but chuckle. A knock on the door interrupted them, and a tall, attractive brunette entered. She was dressed professionally, but not in medical attire, though her badge identified her as hospital staff. "Good morning, Mr. Miller. I'm Dr. Lassiter, one of the hospital's mental health specialists. How are you feeling?" she greeted. "As well as can be expected, I suppose. It's been 9 days since the accident," Martin responded, now able to speak without the aid of a whiteboard. He inquired about his discharge date, but couldn't get a clear answer. "Nevertheless, the hospital asked me to speak with you. It's up to you. If you want to return home soon, I need to clear you for discharge," Dr. Lassiter explained. The psychiatrist responded with a quizzical smile. "Then let's get started," Dr. Lassiter said, pulling up a chair beside the bed and crossing her legs. It took her a few minutes to review the documents. "All right, so you were admitted a little over a week ago following an accident involving a tree collision. I also see that you've prohibited your wife and daughter from visiting you. I suspect there's a connection there," she remarked. "I see," Martin acknowledged. "She was unfaithful," he confessed. "Unfortunately, infidelity is not uncommon these days, although it rarely triggers such a response. Is there more to this?" Dr. Lassiter inquired. Martin remained silent for several minutes, reluctant to discuss it, especially with an attractive woman. He wondered if there was a male psychiatrist he could speak with. Dr. Lassiter waited patiently, accustomed to such hesitance. Finally, Martin began. "I think I've been dealing with depression, although it was never officially diagnosed. I just felt down, whether due to something specific or just in general. And then there was the issue with my hardness, which started about a year after the previous accident." "Right. It's possible she was aware, perhaps even had access to your medical history. She may have been waiting for you to admit it," Dr. Lassiter remarked. "It wasn't even an accident. I was in the back seat. My boss was in the passenger seat and his boss was driving. We were rear-ended. There weren't any airbags or significant damage, but it caught me off guard. I banged my head on the seat in front of me. I reckon that's what caused it," Martin explained. "The report indicates you sustained a blow and a mild concussion. My medical team couldn't pinpoint the exact cause," Dr. Lassiter elaborated. "None of the medications worked. They conducted numerous tests, some repeatedly, and the most they could determine was that something occurred, resulting in damage to part of my brain. Consequently, I couldn't achieve hardness, which led to my wife growing dissatisfied with our bed life, prompting her to have an affair. This eventually wore me down, leading to the events of that evening. Is that accurate? Martin summarized. In essence, yes, Dr. Lassiter confirmed. How long passed before your wife's infidelity? She inquired. About 7 or 8 months, I believe. We attempted to address the issue through other means. Seeking assistance, Martin replied. Yes, I understand the process, Mr. Miller. I've had carnal relations before, Dr. Lassiter responded. Of course. Sorry, I just feel a bit uncomfortable, Martin admitted. No worries. Anyway, initially everything seemed all right, and we held out hope that my condition would improve. We even discussed spending entire weekends in bed enjoying ourselves. But alas, it never materialized. Eventually, it dragged on for so long that she decided to fulfill her needs elsewhere, Martin recounted. Did she discuss this with you beforehand? Dr. Lassiter inquired. No, I found out when I came home from work early, Martin replied. And not only was she with her lover, but my daughter and her boyfriend were there too, he added. Did they engage in group activities? Dr. Lassiter asked, a note of shock in her voice. No, thankfully. Diana and Bill were in the bedroom while Dallas and Brad were in the living room. That's how I discovered my wife's infidelity, and my daughter was aware and seemingly approved, Martin explained. That explains why your daughter was also excluded, Dr. Lassiter noted. Yes. Oh, and if I haven't mentioned it before, Bill is Brad's father. We knew him coincidentally as our daughter's boyfriend's father. Later, I found out it was our daughter who suggested Bill to her mother. It's another blow, Martin continued. Did you confront them? Dr. Lassiter inquired further. Not exactly. Perhaps if Dallas hadn't been present, I might have confronted Diana, but I had seen enough already. So, I left, Martin recounted. How did the conversation go afterward? Dr. Lassiter asked. Not as expected. She expressed regret that I found out, but made it clear that if I couldn't fulfill her needs, she would seek satisfaction elsewhere. She preferred a committed partner, as she put it, rather than being left alone to find someone new. Bill was single and shared similar needs. So he became her choice, Martin explained. Your reaction? Dr. Lassiter queried. What could I do? She was right that I couldn't engage in carnal activity. It wasn't her fault. So she did what she felt she had to, Martin concluded. What if, theoretically, she had discussed it with you beforehand? Would you have agreed? Dr. Lassiter posed the question. I've pondered that a lot. Part of me wanted to say yes because I loved her and wanted her happiness, but ultimately, I don't think I could agree to it. We made vows, we made commitments, including in sickness and in health. I couldn't betray that, so I couldn't fathom her betraying me. Obviously, she continued seeing him, Martin reflected. I'm unsure if she increased the frequency since I don't know how often they met before, but previously it was limited to when I was at work. Now it extended to weekend outings, including visits to the store, during which she clearly spent time with Bill, Martin recounted. That must have been challenging, Dr. Lassiter sympathized. Challenging? That hardly captures the situation. Yet again, I felt powerless. She deserved closeness, but I couldn't provide it. It was tearing me apart, Martin admitted. Tell me about the night of the accident, Dr. Lassiter prompted. The whole family watched a movie on TV. I kept my emotional pain to myself. In hindsight, it may have been a mistake, but I didn't want to burden Diana or Dallas. They exchanged goodnight kisses while I received a simple night from Dallas. It was then I realized she had lost all respect for me as a father and a man. I could hardly blame her, as I didn't respect myself either. I prepared for bed, as usual. Diana did the same. Every night, the same routine, Martin recounted. I waited until Diana was asleep, then got dressed, grabbed my wallet and keys, and went upstairs to peek into Dallas's room. She was asleep. I blew her a kiss and bid farewell. I got into my car, knowing there were airbags, but convinced that if I hit hard enough, they wouldn't matter. I had no specific plan, just aimlessly drove around the area. Passing by the large oak tree, I realized there were no obstacles and a direct path. On a second pass, I headed straight towards it, Martin concluded, both he and Dr. Lassiter sitting in silence as they processed the harrowing tale. Finally, the doctor broke the silence. Mr. Miller, I want to express my gratitude for your openness and honesty. It's quite rare. I'll let you rest and reflect on what you've shared with me. Would it be all right if I returned tomorrow? She asked. I'm not planning on going anywhere, he replied sarcastically. They shook hands, and Dr. Lassiter exited the room. Martin retrieved his cell phone, left at home that fateful night, and later brought by Diana. Despite her protests, he answered several messages and emails, informing his boss of the latest developments, before closing his eyes in an attempt to sleep. Back at home, Diana struggled to maintain composure. She had initially believed Martin was accepting of her relationship with Bill, seeing it as a gesture of love. However, doubts crept in as she reconsidered the incident. She no longer dismissed it as an accident and feared police inquiries regarding her affair with Bill. While extramarital affairs weren't criminal, she worried about potential implications for Martin's case. Perhaps the authorities concluded it was a self-destruction attempt and closed the case. Yet she couldn't recall Martin expressing indifference towards her affair. Moreover, she refused to accept a life of celibacy due to someone framing her husband's boss. Upon Martin's return, Diana resolved to be more attuned to his emotions and to maintain boundaries with Bill. However, she remained determined not to abandon her relationship with him. The following morning, as promised, Dr. Lassiter arrived. Marty noticed the subtle changes in the doctor's attire. However, he still felt withdrawn. "How are you feeling this morning, Mr. Miller?" she inquired. "Not much different from yesterday, Doc," he replied. "Ready to head home?" she asked. "I suppose, but ultimately it's up to you," he responded. "Partially, yes. However, you're required to stay for 72 hours by state law. The countdown began with our conversation yesterday, so you've got at least 2 more days," Dr. Lassiter explained. "That's all right, Doc. At least the food here isn't terrible," Marty joked, and they shared a laugh. "An oldie, but a goodie," Dr. Lassiter remarked. "I'm glad to see you're able to joke," she added. "Me too. It's been a while, months even, since I felt like myself. I used to be quite the joker, sometimes getting on Dallas's nerves," Marty reflected. "Have you had any other troubling thoughts? Any more dark places in your mind?" Dr. Lassiter inquired. "No, Doc, that's not the case. I spent a year feeling pretty down, but lately it's been more about anger and disappointment. Disappointed in Diana and Dallas, especially Diana, but mostly disappointed in myself for not standing up for myself, for not making it clear to my wife that her actions were unacceptable," Marty admitted. "Do you plan to take a stand now?" Dr. Lassiter asked. "Absolutely. While I'm tempted to just file for divorce, I have to acknowledge my role in letting things escalate. But if Diana agrees to end things with Bill, then I'm willing to seek counseling and try to mend our marriage," Marty declared. "I admire your determination, Mr. Miller. Such a quick turnaround is rare," Dr. Lassiter acknowledged. "I had a lot of time to think while lying here before our meeting. I appreciate you giving me the chance to express myself, to confide in someone. It helped me sort through my thoughts," Marty said gratefully. "Excellent, Mr. Miller, simply excellent. In that case, I'll wrap things up for today. I'll check in with you one last time tomorrow, but I see no reason why you can't be discharged as scheduled," Dr. Lassiter concluded. "Looking forward to it, Doc," Marty replied. Diana and Dallas were waiting to pick him up upon his release. If he aimed to initiate change, he needed to begin by behaving as though change were imminent. The airbags proved surprisingly effective, surpassing Marty's expectations. However, the worst aspect was the concussion, necessitating ample rest in a dimly lit room. With the TV off and soft music playing, his wife and daughter doted on him. Everything seemed fine until Diana mentioned the need for shopping. "No," Marty responded calmly. "What?" Diana retorted, puzzled. "Marty, there are items we require, including your healing creams. Make a list for Dallas. She can handle it," she insisted. "Why drag me into this, Dad?" "Besides, I've made plans with Bradley," Dallas interjected. "Then you'll have extra incentive to expedite the shopping, won't you, Diana? Make the list," Marty asserted. "This is absurd, Martin. You can't just come home and upend everything. Dallas has prior plans and I'm going to the store. End of discussion," Diana protested. "Do you take me for a fool, Diana?" Marty challenged. "Fool? No, Marty, never. Why would you say that?" Diana responded. "Do you think I'm oblivious to these shopping trips serving as a pretext to see Bill? I've never forgotten to return home with groceries," Marty asserted. "Yes, and it's a convenient cover, but you've been away too long. Moreover, I can see it in you, in your eyes when you avoid mine, in your attire that seems off, in your makeup that's not quite right. It's always a bit different." "At least you've been spending time with Bill, and that's over now," Marty declared. The shock was evident in Diana's eyes, and Dallas felt a newfound respect for her father. "Marty, please, we've already discussed this. I'll make an effort to be more cautious. It appears I've grown a bit lax in my meetings. Nonetheless, I won't give up on them. I have a right to a personal life, and I intend to have one."
So our vows meant nothing? To stand by each other in sickness and health? Well, this is part of the sickness. You don't abandon others. But you'll stop seeing Bill right away. We'll seek counseling to mend our marriage, or else I'll call a divorce lawyer on Monday, Marty declared firmly. You won't do this, Martin Miller. Don't you dare threaten me. If I could be physical engaged with only you, I would. But circumstances won't allow it. It's not my fault. I didn't cause the accident. I wasn't even involved because I had nothing to do with it. My carnal life is over, and I should just come to terms with it. It's not going to happen, so I'm going to shop, see Bill, and tend to my needs. If you want to discuss it later tonight, we can. But don't think for a moment that you can dictate what I can or cannot do, Diana declared before storming out, slamming the door behind her, rattling the windows. The ensuing silence was heavy. Father and daughter exchanged a glance, then Marty retreated to his bedroom. For the first time, Dallas Miller fretted over her family's future, particularly her parents' marriage. Dad never truly confronted Mom, but nothing this serious had ever occurred between them. Deciding it was their issue and she couldn't intervene, she composed herself and went to meet Bradley. Some part of Diana secretly hoped Marty wouldn't recover because she wasn't certain she could break things off with Bill. Bill was assertive. Bill was forceful. He didn't consider whether his actions suited her. He simply acted. As darkness fell, Dallas returned home to find her father resting in his room. A faint glow emanated from the bathroom where the light was on and the door slightly ajar. She realized her father desired some illumination, but none of the room's lamps emitted such a subdued light. Dad? He remained facing away from her but responded. Dallas, I'm sorry. This piqued his interest, prompting him to sit up in bed and turn to find his daughter quietly weeping in the doorway. What's wrong? He had ceased using the affectionate nicknames he once called her after discovering she aided her mother in finding a partner, feeling unsure about it. Despite her tears now, he couldn't shake the feeling that it was all orchestrated. Dallas moved closer until she stood at the foot of the bed. I'm sorry for what I did. I just wanted to help Mom. She was so upset about what you went through and that you couldn't... Their eyes met briefly. Well, you know what I mean. And Bradley's dad had been going through a similar situation since Mrs. Coyle passed. Bradley says his dad always talks about how much he misses her, especially nearby. I thought they could support each other. I never thought about how it would affect you. Is that what you did that night? Marty was taken aback by his daughter's sudden confession. It might have been a ploy, but he had to take her words at face value. If he was fooled, hurt, deceived again, then so be it. Mostly, yeah. I guess I was pretty down because I couldn't... Well, you know. Father and daughter shared a fleeting smile. But it's over now, Dally. I won't let it happen again. I hope not. I need you. Are you going to divorce Mom? I haven't decided yet, honey, but unless she stops seeing Bill, I don't see any other outcome. But keep this between us. She needs to change because she wants to, not because she's forced to. Okay, Dad. I'll head upstairs. Oh, I broke up with Bradley tonight. Marty tried to suppress a smile. He hadn't particularly cared for the boy, so this news surprised him, especially considering Dallas seemed to have a crush on him or even be in love. Why? Marty inquired, intrigued by this development. Because, Dallas started, then paused to reflect. Because my dad once told me he wasn't good enough for me, and I finally realized he was right. I finally saw that my dad was right about a lot of things. A smile spread across Marty's face as he realized his daughter had matured significantly today. Dallas approached her father, embraced him, noting it was the first hug they'd shared in a long while. They pulled apart, exchanged smiles. Then Marty watched as Dallas quietly left the room, heading upstairs until he heard the click of her bedroom door. He heard Diana's cheerful voice as she locked her car. The warm feelings he had just experienced vanished instantly. He lay back down, closing his eyes. Shortly after, Diana entered the bedroom. She'd showered at Bill's, and Marty commented it was better for her to return smelling fresh rather than of lovemaking. Could you lend a hand with the groceries, please? Did you get everything on the list? Marty joked, taking a seat. Yes, Marty. I said I was going grocery shopping, and I did. Marty unloaded the bags from the car onto the counter. He noticed there were no perishables. Glancing at the receipt, he saw she'd left the store almost 2 hours ago. I went shopping first, then I visited Bill. Despite anticipating it, the sight before him still stung. After unpacking, Marty retreated to the bedroom, pondering whether it was worth reopening the conversation. It seemed futile.
Diana had made her intentions clear, leaving him to consider his next move. Change was imperative. "Need to talk some more?" Diana inquired, her tone suggesting it might not be productive. "No, Diana, your stance is crystal clear." Her expression softened, revealing her love for him. He was her confidant, her favorite companion. She believed her pursuit of carnal fulfillment, given the circumstances, shouldn't pose an issue, hoping he'd eventually agree. With a nod, Diana headed to her closet, contemplating rekindling closeness with Marty, but not tonight. By the time she prepared for bed, Marty appeared to be asleep, or at least he put on a convincing act. The divorce proceedings were turbulent. Diana seethed with anger. When the papers arrived, Marty ensured they were delivered home, opting to be with Dallas. Taking up residence in the upstairs guest room next to Dallas's, Diana vehemently opposed the divorce. She retained a highly aggressive attorney who pursued every avenue, even attempting to declare him mentally unfit due to a supposed self-destruction attempt. Anticipating such tactics and believing it prudent, Marty commenced counseling the same week the legal proceedings began. The psychologist he consulted was renowned, and his testimony certifying Marty's mental stability swayed the judge. While the legal battle could have dragged on, Dallas intervened just as Diana seemed poised to escalate matters. Dallas firmly reminded her mother that her actions contradicted their family vows and obligations. Despite life's unfairness, she emphasized the importance of standing by her husband through thick and thin. Dallas warned that further resistance would irrevocably strain their mother-daughter relationship. Confronted with the prospect of losing both her husband and daughter, Diana relented, withdrawing her opposition to the divorce. Their house was sold, with Marty consenting to alimony for a specified period, a concession he knew the court would mandate anyway. Diana secured a 2-bedroom apartment close to her workplace, eventually returning to full-time employment 8 months post-divorce. The dissolution left her embittered, particularly when Bill ended their relationship, revealing his involvement with other women. Diana's allure waned once she was no longer married. Meanwhile, Dallas pursued her education, dividing her time between both parents. Over time, Diana adopted a sufferer mentality, persistently blaming Marty for the divorce. Once more, when Dallas overheard her mother's remark, "If only he were more understanding," she snapped back. "Did you even consider Dad?" Around 10 p.m. on a Friday night, Marty stepped into the dimly lit club, seeking an escape from home. He simply sought a brief, enjoyable diversion. A couple of drinks and perhaps some dancing were all he had in mind. Settling onto a bar stool, he ordered a rum and coke. Sipping his drink, he scanned the crowd and noticed a woman at the far end of the bar who seemed familiar, though he couldn't quite place her. A nearly empty wine glass sat before her. Her dark brown flowing hair and revealing dress caught his attention. Straining to recall, Marty suddenly remembered. A faint smile touched his lips as he picked up his drink and approached her. Just as he drew near, she glanced up. "Dr. Lassiter," he said. She met his gaze, studying his face for a moment, but initially showed no sign of recognition, making Marty question his memory. "I leave Dr. Lassiter at the hospital. Out here I'm Vicky, but I'm afraid you have the upper hand. It's been a while, and I'm sure you interact with far more patients than I do with exceptional psychologists. Names stick with me better than faces." "Test me. Martin Miller," he challenged. Vicky pondered the name briefly, and Marty patiently awaited her response. Observing her closely, he almost believed he could see the light bulb flicker in her mind. "Ah, Mr. Miller, a cheating spouse and a rather sudden encounter with a tree, if memory serves." "You're spot on. It's surprising we've only spoken twice, nearly a year. No, almost 2 years ago. It's chance." "Won't you join me?" Marty settled in, signaling for the bartender to refill their glasses. "Thanks, I'm game." "So what brings you out tonight, seeing someone special?" Marty inquired. "Trying to," Vicky responded, the glint in her eyes leaving no doubt about her intentions. "Really? I recall a rather impressive rock on your finger, or was I mistaken?" "Not long after my divorce was finalized, I kept wearing my rings, hoping to make my ex-husband, realize he had little in common with a 20-year-old cashier, apart from wanting her friend to join them in bed. Unfortunately, I didn't succeed." "Good Lord. Are they still together?" "Surprise, Mr. Miller, but I lost interest in Wayne's love life post-divorce." "No clue." "A dumb question, admittedly. And please, Marty or Martin, or even, but spare me, Mr. Miller. What did your wife call you?" "Marty." "Well, Martin, care to hit the dance floor with me? I'm game." Martin instructed the bartender to safeguard their drinks before leading Vicky to the dance floor. They swayed to a fast beat, effortlessly syncing up. Another lively tune followed before a slower melody took over. They remained entwined for the duration, swaying gently to the slower rhythm. Vicky wrapped her arms around Martin's neck while he held her close, hands firm against her back. Noticing the absence of a bra, Martin, being a man, was quick to observe. They locked eyes for a moment before Vicky nestled her head onto his shoulder, their embrace unbroken. As the second song began, Martin found himself entranced by the soft, intoxicating presence of this woman. When the music faded, Vicky seized the opportunity of lowered volume to speak softly. "Martin, I've had my fill of dancing, but I'm also feeling quite alone, if you catch my drift," she murmured in his ear. "How about I take you home and we address that?" Martin grasped her hand and guided her back to the bar, settling the tab and informing the bartender they were finished. The lack of surprise from the bartender suggested Vicky had arrived by Uber. They made their way to Martin's car, and he drove them to his apartment. "Vicky, perhaps I should have asked earlier, but how much have you had to drink?" "I only had 1 glass of wine at the bar." "When you first arrived?" "Just making sure, because I don't take advantage of intoxicated women." "Don't fret, Martin." Arriving at his underground garage, they rode the elevator to his floor, Vicky clinging to him the entire time, stealing passionate kisses along the way. As soon as they entered his apartment and the door shut behind them, Vicky swiftly removed her dress. "Oh, Vicky, you look absolutely stunning." "Thank you, Martin. But are you just going to admire?" "I hope not." "Then lead me to your bedroom." Martin took her hand and guided her down the hallway, thankful that Dallas was visiting her mother that weekend. "I hope you have contraceptives." Martin did indeed have a few stashed in his bedside drawer, which he retrieved and placed on the nightstand. After over an hour of passionate lovemaking, they finally came back to reality. Martin lay on his back, with Vicky snuggled up to his left side. They weren't quite asleep, but were in that serene state between wakefulness and slumber. Martin felt rather than saw Vicky lift her head. "Martin, I just recalled the issue of erectile dysfunction in your story. Did that ever get resolved?" "Thankfully, it's no longer a problem." "What happened?" "Well, a couple of months after the accident with the oak tree, I began to feel a tingling sensation, as if a paralyzed limb were starting to recover. This sensation persisted for several weeks." "Were you still married? Did you discuss it with your wife?" "Technically, yes, we were still married, but we had been living apart for a while. And no, I didn't discuss it with her. It didn't seem relevant. Over the following months, I started experiencing morning hardness more frequently, even during the day. After about 8 or 9 months, everything returned to normal." "What did the doctors say?" "They couldn't provide a definitive answer. Despite numerous tests and scans, they couldn't pinpoint any specific cause. Ultimately, they attributed it to a peculiarity of the brain. They speculated that the impact from the tree might have somehow resolved the issue, but it remains uncertain." "Well, I guess I'm fortunate. Would it be all right if I stayed the night?" "All right. Are we planning to have another round in the morning and then grab breakfast together?" As they settled in for the night, Martin had one more question. "Vicky, do you feel ready for a serious relationship?" There was a prolonged silence, and Martin worried he might have overstepped, fearing she might bolt out of bed and request a ride home. Her attraction to him was undeniable, and it wasn't solely based on physical allure. She possessed intelligence, and he enjoyed her company. While it wasn't love yet, she was the first woman he had seriously considered after his divorce. "Can we discuss this in the morning?" "Of course. Good night, Vicky." "Good night, Martin." Vicky woke up before Martin, finding him in peaceful repose, so she decided to let him sleep. After using his shower, she headed to the kitchen to prepare breakfast. Martin's question from the previous night caught her off guard. It wasn't that she lacked attraction to him, but she had been focused on enjoying the moment. For months, she had convinced herself that she didn't need a man in her life, which was partially true. With a good job and supportive friends, she was content. However, if she were entirely honest with herself, she longed for companionship. But how would a decent man react once she shared her truth? Martin was roused from sleep by the aroma of something cooking. He stumbled into the kitchen to find Vicky wearing his shirt from the previous night and sporting the apron he kept in his closet. "I was planning to invite you for breakfast, but it seems a bit late now. How about you invite me for lunch? Go get a quick shower and breakfast will be ready in 10 minutes. Martin joined Vicky in the kitchen just as she was setting up plates. On the table sat an omelet, a couple of sausages, and a piece of buttered toast. "I didn't realize I had sausages in there. They were in the freezer. Hopefully they're still good." Martin took a bite and complimented the meal. Breakfast itself passed relatively quietly, with Martin taking on the task of cleaning the kitchen since Vicky had kindly prepared the food. They engaged in casual conversation until they finished, and once everything was loaded into the dishwasher, Martin turned to Vicky. "Are you ready to talk?" "Mostly." "Listen, Vicky, I don't want to complicate things or intrude on your life. If you're only interested in a casual encounter, that's okay. You don't owe me anything." "I understand. There's something I need to tell you. Can we discuss it in the bedroom? I'll feel more comfortable there." They held hands and moved to the bedroom, sitting on the bed facing each other. Vicky squeezed Martin's hands tightly. "Martin, although we only met last night, I think you're a wonderful person, and I genuinely like you. But there's something important you should know. I mentioned that my husband left me for a younger woman, which is true, but it's not the whole story. The main reason he left was because I can't have children. He wanted a family of his own and couldn't accept adoption as an alternative. He saw our inability to have biological children as a failure on my part. I'm in my 40s with an adult daughter. While I wouldn't mind having children, it's not a deal breaker for me. Good to know. Another thing I feel it's important for you to understand, well, at least I want to be honest about it. It's something I'm not proud of. After the divorce was finalized, I went through a rough patch. I was grappling with my age and the fact that my husband left me for someone much younger. In case you're curious, I'm 37. I was curious, but I wasn't going to ask. They both shared a slight chuckle. I also felt, well, incomplete, I guess is the best way to put it. Honestly, I didn't feel like much of a woman at all. How can you feel like a woman when you can't have children? I know what you're thinking, but that's exactly how I felt at the time. So I decided to reclaim my femininity. If I couldn't define it through motherhood, then I was determined to define it in other ways. I engaged in casual encounters, mostly with strangers, but there were many of them. I adopted the alias Angela and never turned down an opportunity when I felt like it. This continued for several months until I realized it was self-destructive and sought therapy. Even then, I continued, albeit less frequently, until I reached a point where I could put an end to it. "Wasn't that what you were up to last night?" Martin asked cautiously. He didn't want to come off as judgmental, just genuinely curious. But there was no denying that last night she was on the prowl. She was unmistakably a cougar. "Yes, that's right. As a woman, I have needs, and sometimes I go out to fulfill them. But now, I'm more selective about who I choose. There have been many nights when I ended up going home alone and, well, taking care of things myself. I suppose I should be grateful I passed the test." "Of course, Martin. I genuinely enjoy our time together. And to answer your question, I'm keen to explore more, but I want to be transparent about my past experiences. I actually got tested recently and fortunately came out clean, which was incredibly fortunate. I'm not on birth control, but I can provide a note from my doctor if you need confirmation. Assuming you're open to it, I suggest we both get tested and commit to being exclusive." Martin sat in silence for a few moments, processing her words. Vicky waited anxiously but patiently. Finally, he was ready to respond. "Vicky, thank you for being so upfront. I know that couldn't have been easy. I think I owe you the same. Our experiences aren't too dissimilar. After my divorce, I was relieved it was over, but struggled with feelings of inadequacy. I didn't know how I'd ever find another partner, and I faced the prospect of being completely alone. My therapist pointed out that, as we age, many women lose interest in lovemaking and prefer non-carnal affection. I thought I'd have to find someone much older than me, or wait a few years until things improved. And even when it seemed like everything was back to normal, I wasn't in the best shape. As you felt the need to demonstrate your femininity, I felt compelled to prove my masculinity. I went out often to pursue women, aiming to establish, at least in my own perception, my prowess. I wasn't any more selective than you. Some encounters were rather casual. Let's just say I've had my fair share of experiences. This continued for a while, but I wasn't as fortunate as you. I faced a bout of gonorrhea and had to confess to my doctor that I couldn't recall the names of my carnal partners. We addressed everything, and through therapy, I started to examine my behavior. It's been a long time since I've engaged with a woman without protection, but I'm willing to get tested and commit to exclusivity. "So are we giving it a shot, you and me?" Vicky inquired, her eyes blinking, already knowing the answer. "I suppose so," Martin responded to this rhetorical question. Martin's stash of contraceptives had been depleted by lunchtime. The inevitable encounter with Diana happened approximately 3 months into Martin and Vicky's relationship. Their bond was strong, and Vicky got along well with Dallas. Although they each had their own homes, they spent every night together, hinting at a more permanent commitment. They decided to visit a club catering to a mature crowd, with a DJ spinning tunes and a layout that facilitated conversation. Martin and Vicky enjoyed their evening. However, Vicky was caught off guard when Martin's smile suddenly vanished, his gaze shifting past her. Curiously following his line of sight, she spotted Diana. Martin and Diana locked eyes almost simultaneously. Martin's expression turned neutral, while Diana's face twisted into a smirk as she approached their table. Despite the passage of time, Diana remained bitter after the divorce. She still believed she hadn't done anything truly wrong, aside from perhaps lacking discretion. However, engaging in extramarital affairs due to her husband's shortcomings wasn't something she viewed as erroneous. As she neared the table, her intention was far from amicable.
"Marty, how delightful to see you,"
Diana remarked with unmistakable sarcasm. "Diana, Vicky, this is my ex-wife, Diana," Martin introduced, though he would have preferred not to.
"Pleased to meet you, Diana. I've heard quite a bit about you,"
Vicky offered.
"Well, I haven't heard a single word about you," Diana retorted bitterly. "We're divorced, Diana. It's been over a year. My life is no longer your concern. Now, if you'll excuse us," Martin interjected, implying that he wanted his ex-wife to leave them alone. "Of course, Martin. I wouldn't want to intrude on your date, but, Vicky, there's something you should know," Diana interjected. "And what might that be?" Vicky inquired, glancing at Martin before turning back to Diana. "You probably don't want to mess with him. We got divorced because he couldn't perform."
Martin observed Vicky closely, awaiting her response while Vicky struggled to suppress a soft chuckle. She turned to Martin, raising an eyebrow.
"Is that true?
I don't recall you mentioning that." Martin simply shrugged, leaving it to Vicky to handle. Diana believed she had the upper hand, thinking she had disrupted Marty's relationship just as he had done with her and Bill. She relished the moment. However, her satisfaction was short-lived. Well, that's fortunate because if what I was writing last night wasn't aroused, then a real hardness would likely finish me off. Diana's smile vanished instantly. Vicky and Martin exchanged glances that subtly mocked Diana's feeble attempt to create a rift between them, leaving Diana looking perplexed.
"Wait, what is she talking about?" Vicky asked. "Marty, you're not saying that everything's functioning now, are you?" Martin responded. "It appears that during infrequent visits, Dallas didn't keep her mother updated on Martin's personal life," Vicky explained.
"Diana, you're still as sharp as ever," Martin added.
"Just like old times," Vicky chimed in. "But how is this even possible? Did doctors find a cure?" Diana pressed, growing more excited.
Martin and Vicky remained silent, allowing Diana's agitation to escalate further.
"Come on, Marty. This issue ended our marriage. I think I deserve to know what was wrong," Diana insisted.
The smile faded from Martin's face.
"Firstly, Diana, it was your actions that ended our marriage, not my condition. You made the choice to do what you did, not me. Secondly, you don't deserve to know anything. We're divorced, and my personal matters are just that. Personal. Please, Marty, you can attribute our breakup to my choices all you want, and I can't argue with that, but I wouldn't have done what I did if everything was normal," Diana countered. "All right, Diana, it just happened. The doctors believe that whatever the issue was, after my first accident, it simply needed time to heal. If you had been patient and stood by me through my illness, as our vows stated, we'd still be married." Diana was stunned, her mouth agape as she struggled to find words in response to the shocking revelation. "I can't believe this. It's like fate is against me," she exclaimed.
"He's just upholding the vows," Martin muttered. Curious, Diana's eyes gleamed as she inquired,
"What was it?"
"Nothing. It doesn't matter now. You know the truth. Could you please give us the rest of the evening?" Martin requested. After a thoughtful pause of about 30 seconds, Diana met Martin's gaze with a contrite expression. "You're right, Marty. I owe you an apology. My actions were selfish and short-sighted. I should have been stronger. I destroyed a good marriage. I'm truly sorry," she confessed. With that, Diana left not only their table, but also the club itself. Martin and Vicky watched her departure, feeling a twinge of pity for her. Martin then turned to Vicky. "Let's dance, my love." 6 months later, Martin and Vicky tied the knot.